Chapter 6. Riksos, the Telescope, Mr. Antony, the Feluc Judicial System, and the Turos. Meanwhile, in Feluc, Castor and Pollux, along with young Felix, were still up to their usual antics. They were growing stronger every day, especially Felix and Lucas's children. This time, the whole gang was in the forest when they encountered a creature resembling a wolf, but much larger. It looked wounded and was bleeding from its side. It growled at them, baring its sharp, white fangs. The boys retreated, but not too far, before a Phaliona appeared and fixed its large compound eyes on the wolf-like creature. It moved toward it with its scythe-like limbs, and they clashed. Although the wolf-like creature looked more imposing, it was already wounded and lost the battle, collapsing and bleeding even more. Then a noise caught the giant insect's attention. It was some pups that the Rikso was apparently defending. At that moment, the boys sprang into action. Although the Phaliona was much smaller than the Larkon they hadn't been able to defeat, it was faster, and its exoskeleton was quite tough. But this time, they knew the Phaliona's weak points, its joints. The boys began attacking the different joints that connected its limbs. They ended up completely dismembering it until Felix Jr. finally cut off its head. Because of its different anatomy compared to mammals, it continued moving its antennae for hours before becoming immobile, though the boys didn't stay to watch. They saved the 4 pups, but now there was another problem. Their mother was dead, and they had no idea how to care for them. "Let's take them to Dad. He'll know what to do with them," said Castor, not entirely convinced. "But he hasn't returned from his trip to Loomis," Pollux said. "Very well, let's take them to Mother." But Neris hadn't arrived home from work, so they got a wooden box and put them in it with some rags and tried to keep them entertained. Then Neris arrived. Castor and Pollux were frightened. Neris could feel the tension in the air. "What did you do now?" Neris asked, looking annoyed. In response, they took her by the hand and led her to the room. "These are Riksos. Do you have any idea how dangerous they are?" Neris asked. "But they're just babies," Castor defended himself. And he proceeded to tell her the whole story, omitting the part about the Phaliona. "There's something you're not telling me," said Neris, who knew her son better than anyone. "We fought a Phaliona to rescue them," Castor said, expecting the worst when he saw his mother's furious face. She took a deep breath. "Very well, your punishment will be postponed until your father arrives. In the meantime, we can't let them die. Fortunately, I kept one of the bottles Sylph used when I wasn't around, and she had to take care of them. We'll give them milk from our animals. I hope it won't be too different from their mothers, but you will be in charge of feeding them. That will be your responsibility. Do you understand?" Then she forced them to prepare the bottles with milk and feed the puppies one by one. At first, Neris was frightened by the things her children could do, things that normal children couldn't do. They had inherited Lucas's power, although in their case, they would have to develop it. Of course, deep down, she was proud of her children, but she thought she had to appear stern. Several days later, Lucas returned from his trip and found a minor crisis at home because of the puppies. "What will we do now, Lucas?" Neris asked, worried. "Don't worry," Lucas said reassuringly. "In my world, it has been customary for centuries to domesticate wild animals that eventually became dogs and cats. Their ancestors were wild. The practice of domesticating wild animals is practically unknown in this world. Why don't we try to domesticate these, which don't look very different from dogs except for their size, as an experiment? If it doesn't work, we'll release them into the forest." Then Lucas turned to his 2 children. "You can keep them, but it will be your responsibility to take care of them. And any damage they do will also be your responsibility," he warned them. "Thanks, Dad," the teenagers said, unaware of the problems their new pets would bring them. Although they had already experienced a bit of that. The first night, they started screaming so loudly because their mother wasn't around anymore, so they had no choice but to bring them to sleep in their beds, 2 in each room. The next day, they got up early to feed the puppies, just as their father had instructed. They had to put them in another room of the house because of the smell of their excrement. Before leaving for school, they had to clean it up. When they returned from school, they again had to clean up the gifts the puppies had left behind, and they began to doubt that adopting the puppies had been a good idea. But now they were strictly forbidden from abandoning them. They would have to raise and train them on Lucas's orders, who required a daily report of their progress. Several months later, the puppies were already the size of a German Shepherd's. They had also proven to be more intelligent than the average dog, and all 4 had their own distinct personalities that earned them their names. When Lucas was teaching his children how to train their puppies, they used small pieces of meat as rewards, but one of them surprisingly refused the bribes, although he did participate in the training. Neris, seeing that attitude, remarked, "That one seems very proud and haughty." "Proud? That seems like a good name for him. What do you think, boys?" Lucas asked. "Yes," said Castor and Pollux almost in unison, and they began to pet him and call him by that name. At first, he didn't respond, but finally, he accepted his new name. On one occasion, Pollux was training another of the cubs, who were already too big to be called that. Two large snakes were about to attack them when the cub got there first, biting one of them near its head. This gave Pollux time to react, drawing his sword and cutting off the second snake's head. When it was all over, the cub stared at Pollux, as if waiting for praise. "You are very loyal, friend," Pollux said. Then he placed his paws on the boy's chest, licking his face. "Very good. From now on, your name will be Loyal," the young man concluded, to which the Rikso acted somewhat playfully. Apparently, he liked the name, and he became Pollux's inseparable companion wherever he went. To avoid panic, Lucas ordered them to put collars and chains on them. This went for all four of them, who continued to grow stronger but followed the boy's lead. Another of the young Riksos had become very close with young Felix, and they even went hunting together. Young Felix carried a crossbow designed for him by Shinri, as well as one of the new steel swords forged using techniques Shinri had learned from the Akyuans. Shinri saw great potential in young Felix because he saw the resemblance between him and his father. When they entered the forest, they found nothing worth hunting. This went on for 2 hours, but suddenly they came across Achilles. That was the name the locals had given the giant scorpions. Its glossy black color made it look even more intimidating. It raised its pincers and readied its stinger to attack, but the no longer so young Rikso got there first, flanking it and biting its tail as young Felix fired his crossbow. The steel point pierced its exoskeleton. Felix knew he was not going to defeat it with just that, so he unsheathed his brand new sword and began attacking the beast's joints. Meanwhile, the pup's incredibly strong jaws had knocked the stinger to the ground, rendering it harmless. Little by little, they dismembered the arachnid, which, although still alive, was no longer a danger to anything or anyone, but young Felix finished it off anyway. "That was very brave," he said, petting his now best friend. "I think from now on, that will be your name, Brave." But he decided to take the stinger with him, making sure not to touch it directly, just in case. The fourth pup developed a close friendship with Laszlo, who came almost every day, initially out of curiosity, but over time he grew fond of them and helped with their training. One morning, while Laszlo and the pup were hunting Alteris together, these animals were similar to llamas. They discovered they weren't the only ones hunting them. Right in front of them appeared a Larkon, but not just any Larkon. Gazlo recognized with horror that it was the same one that had thrown them into the river months before. But now he was alone with the Rikso. The Larkon apparently recognized him and charged forward. The pup flanked it, biting its hind legs while moving with lightning speed, avoiding the reptile's tail, and also when it turned to try to bite him with its venomous fangs. They continued fighting. Laszlo, following his training, tried to attack its joints, knowing from experience that its skin was too thick to attack the main body. Then the puppy saw a large stone at the top of the hill and ran to it. At first, Laszlo didn't understand what the pup was trying to do, but then it placed its paws against the stone. This made Laszlo realize what was happening, and he tried to distract it long enough for it to get under the stone. The Rikso pushed the stone with its paws, but it didn't budge. The pup then pushed the stone with its head, applying all the strength of its body, and the stone finally gave way, first rolling and then falling onto the Larkin's back, leaving it badly injured. Laszlo took his sword and began to chop off the reptile's head, like someone felling a tree with an axe, striking it repeatedly with the sword while the Larkon roared in pain. In the end, the head hung from its body, and the monster lay lifeless. Then the puppet came to Laszlo's side and placed its paws on his chest, licking his face. "That was very sly on your part." "Sly? That's it. That will be your name. Clever." Rikso seemed to like his new name, and wagged his tail as if he were just an ordinary dog and not a dangerous, albeit domesticated, predator. Gazlo decided to take the Larkin's head. He wasn't yet sure whether to sell it or keep it as a trophy, but the other parts of the Larkin's body that did have commercial value. Meanwhile, In Feluc, Felix had decided to summon Riksos, Aneto, and Una. "How can we serve you, Lord Felix?" Riksos asked. "Yes, all three of you. I'd like to know if you would be willing to move to Loomis," Felix inquired. "Us?" Una asked. "Yes, we need someone to train the new recruits there. As you know, I personally trained Riksos, who is here today, and Lazar recommended you both to me. Besides, I saw you at the tournament we had here and was very impressed," Felix said. "I'll speak with my wife, Dwina, my lord. As you know, she has a few months left before giving birth to our second child," Riksos explained. "Very well. If you wish, you can wait until your child is born if you want to move there. You can continue training Kameter here, and if he wants, he can accompany you to Loomis," Felix said. "Thank you, my lord," Riksos replied. "Very well. I am promoting all three of you to the rank of captain, and you will be in charge of the safety of the people of Loomis." The three knelt. "We will not let you down, Lord Felix." "Thank you for this honor," Riksos said, and the others nodded in agreement with the giant's words. Meanwhile, Lucas had gone home early to help his sons, and the other youngsters train the not-so-young pups. The experiment to try and domesticate the Riksos was proving successful. This could have significant repercussions in the future. When he arrived home, the boys were outside. "We have an announcement to make, Uncle Lucas," said young Felix. "Brave bow." The Rikso did something resembling a bow. Laszlo ordered, "Sly bow." He too bowed. Then Pollux ordered, "Loyal bow." He too bowed. Castor ordered, "Proud bow." The latter looked at Castor and then at Lucas, and turned his head to the side in a proud gesture, embarrassing his companion. "He lives up to his name. Right, Castor?" Lucas smiled, amused. "Actually, they all earned their names, each in their own way," Laszlo explained. Later, Aronix sat across from Felix. "Hey Aronix, you look tired. Are you sleeping well?" Felix asked, somewhat concerned. "Oh, it's just that I have a lot of work," Aronix replied. "Yes, people of all races come to me to resolve their disputes, so my courtroom is always full," the now judge remarked. Then it dawned on Felix. "I've been a fool. At first, after appointing you judge and relieving you of your other duties, I thought that would be enough. But several years have passed since then, and the city has grown too large for just one judge. Forgive me for allowing you to carry such a heavy burden alone," Felix said. "Actually, I didn't dare say anything because I thought you might consider me incompetent for the job," Aronix said humbly. "Please have a little more faith in me." "Very well. What if we appoint one judge for each race to represent them initially, and we add more judges as needed, with only the most difficult cases going to you?" Felix explained. "That would leave me with little to do." "On the contrary," Felix said enthusiastically, "it would give you more time to dedicate to the most complex cases." Several days later, Aronix returned not only with the list, but also with the candidates in person. There was an Acaro named Oristus, an elderly Terrid named Turos, a middle-aged giant named Boldo, an older Aemsis named Tertius, an older Nailite named Convallo, an Achaean named Naludo, and also an elder Telera Tampi. Of course the last one didn't look older than 30 years old. The surrounding buildings had to be adapted to serve as minor courts. All the candidates had been Aronix assistants at some point, so they were familiar with their roles. There were a few hiccups, but the people grew accustomed to having their cases handled by someone other than Aronix. At first, Aronix doubted it would work, but he was pleasantly surprised that it did. "I didn't think it would work, Felix. Where did you get the idea?" the judge asked. "It was from a story I read many years ago," Felix replied. "Tell me about it, please," Aronix requested. "It was about a man named Moses. His God entrusted him with freeing his people from slavery in a land called Egypt. God used his powers to help him with this task, and he succeeded. When his freed people were crossing the desert toward the land God had promised them, he was their only leader, chieftain, and judge, and he was overwhelmed with so much work. Then his father-in-law, named Jethro, visited him, but he noticed how exhausted he was. So he recommended that he appoint capable people to serve as junior judges, and only the most difficult cases would go to Moses," Felix explained. "This Moses reminds me a lot of you and Lucas," Aronix remarked. The comparison made Felix blush. Later, the council met to discuss the day's issues. Elios was there, talking about the latest discovery in Loomis. "We found a workshop where they were making pieces of glass that make things look bigger and others that make them look smaller. Others make them look farther away. I brought some samples here," he said, placing several lenses on the table. I assigned an Achaean named Trantor to study them, Aelios explained. And this one? Lucas asked, intrigued. Nothing, it just makes things look darker, Aelios said. Interesting, Lucas said thoughtfully. I know that look, Lord Lucas. You're getting an idea, aren't you? Aelios asked admiringly. Actually, it's two ideas, Lucas said, taking the convex and concave lenses and placing them one in front of the other. Come here, Aelios, and tell me what you see, he said, gesturing for Aelios to come closer. Incredible, things look so much closer, Aelios said, fascinated. The others present also wanted to see, and they were pleasantly surprised. I think you're on the verge of reinventing the telescope, aren't you, Luke? Felix remarked. At this, everyone looked at him intrigued. Telescope? They asked almost in unison. Yes, it's a device that allows you to see things that are far away, Felix explained. Oh, they exclaimed in amazement. What's your other idea, Lord Lucas? Aelios asked, feeling his admiration for Lucas grow. Listen, Aelios, this isn't my invention. It's been around for centuries. And it seems the people of Loomis were about to invent it anyway. He tried not to take credit that wasn't his, but he knew it was pointless. Everyone would think it was his invention. This could help our lighter friends leave their caves during the day. They can use this to cover their eyes during the day, but it's still too early to say if it will work. Also, when people travel through the desert where the sun feels even brighter than here. When I return to Loomis, I'll talk to Trantor about all of this, so he knows what he needs to work on. Listen, Lord Felix, I loved the tournament I witnessed between representatives of your soldiers at the festivities you organized to celebrate the birth of our nation, said Ixtales, now with a permanent seat in the government building, since most of his people had moved to Feluc, including him. Me too, said Felix. But what's your point? Asked the leader. What if we do something similar, but including all races? Said the Akan leader. That's interesting, commented Gazlo. I like the idea, but what's the real reason for suggesting it? Asked Lucas. You're as clever as I've heard, Mr. Lucas, said Ixtales, laughing. The truth is, I'd like to test myself against you. Mr. Rado says you're stronger than him. I want to see how strong you really are, the Akan finished. Very well. We'll begin the preparations. After all, almost all the races represented here have an important warrior tradition. Also, it will unite all races in one single event. Felix replied. Later, Felix arrived home and Ulia, who had arrived earlier, was in the kitchen. She greeted him with a kiss. I have news for you. I haven't had my period for 2 months. I think I'm pregnant again, she whispered in his ear. Really? He asked, excited. I'm sure, his wife affirmed. 3 more months would pass as they made preparations for all the races to participate in the tournament. There would be humans, Acheros, Acuns, Terids, Teleras, Lighters, and even Camator and the Ephors were invited. It was going to be an event that would last a few days. First the qualifying rounds, and then the main event. It was an event where no weapons would be used. Felix and Lucas would participate like any other competitor. That night, Zariel appeared to him. Hello, Zariel. Do you have any warning for me? Felix asked, intrigued. Oh no, I just want to congratulate you. You're going to be the father of a beautiful and healthy baby girl, the spirit said. Incredible, exclaimed the proud father, overcome with emotion. You deserve all this happiness for everything you and your brother have done for our people, Zariel declared. True, but you benefit too. The happier we are, the more powerful you become, Felix retorted. You're right, but I'm going to need all the power I can muster to defeat my brothers Euphril and Chill. It's necessary to put an end to all the violence they foment in their quest to feed on hatred and anger, the spiritual being explained. Thank you for being on our side, Zariel, Felix said gratefully. It couldn't be any other way, Felix. My brothers want servants. I prefer friends. By the way, I was impressed to see that your son and Lucas's sons were able to tame such wild creatures as the Riksos. That's never been done in this world. Perhaps you can do the same with Yokin or other beasts. Felix couldn't help but feel proud of his son and nephews, and also of Lucas, whose idea it was to try and tame those beasts. You're about to wake up. Goodbye, said Zariel smiling at him. Felix opened his eyes and, as always, found Ulia beside him, also waking up. Did you sleep well, my love? She asked. Yes, although Zariel appeared to me, he replied. Did he tell you anything important? She asked. Yes, he said we're having a girl. Felix answered with a smile. I'm so happy, exclaimed the expectant mother. What do you think about naming her after your mother? From what you've told me about her, I think she was an exceptional woman. I wish I could have met her, Alia said with a sigh. It's decided. Her name will be Louisa, Felix replied. Hundreds of flyers were printed to invite participants to the tournament. Alios even sent a messenger to visit the Efers to invite them to the event. Both Rosu and Arias were interested. They had only had contact with a few races and were intrigued by the idea of a city where all races had close ties with one another. Alios had given them a small boat as a gift, but they still needed to learn how to sail. If their ancestors had learned to sail, then they would too. That's why Zenjace and Texo were there to teach them. Roxu was there as well. He had already received training from the two of them, so he was more familiar with the operation of the sailboat. I think you should name your boat, Zenjace suggested. A name? The two Efers asked, intrigued. Yes, in the place where Lord Felix and Lord Lucas come from. It has been a tradition for centuries to name ships. For example, ours is called the Defender, Zenjace explained. Very well, ours will be called Zerial's Favor, Arias replied, and Rosu agreed. They had been in contact with the spirit and had applied its advice. They had also been in contact with other members of Zerial's family, such as Lumiel, spirit of love, Kalil, spirit of altruism, Dislal, spirit of humility, Talil, spirit of hope, Beniel, spirit of enjoyment of work, Raphael, spirit of selflessness, and Laviel, spirit of contentment. These spirits fed on positive energies and helped them with their millions of years of experience. The Efers decided to build a chapel to honor these beings to venerate them. They did this after learning what their friends in Feluc and Loomis had done. Messengers were also sent to the Teleras and the Lighters near Loomis. The Vinfos were also notified, but they obviously couldn't attend. However, they too were friends, so they were informed. Tranta went with the messenger to see the Lighters. He was very impressed by how large and strong they looked. Of course, as an Achaean, he also looked impressive, although he preferred the path of knowledge to the path of the warrior. If he saw the need, he too would take up arms, but only if there was no other option. But he was eager to test whether the sun protection he had been working tirelessly on would help the Lighters. You say this will protect our eyes from the sun's rays, Lord Tranter? Amida asked skeptically. That was Lord Lucas's idea, but I don't know if it will work, the Achaean countered. Very well. As the representative of my people, it must be you who tests it. Let's go outside. He immediately rose from his makeshift stone throne and accompanied Tranter to the entrance. There, the Achaean explained how to put them on. Of course, they weren't worn like sunglasses, but like protective goggles. Amitu, with his eyes closed, was led by Tranter's arm. Once outside, wearing the goggles, he opened his eyes. He looked around and was surprised to see that his eyes were protected from the sun's glare. He even decided to take flight and loved it. But then the goggles loosened to the point that he needed both hands to keep them in place. He decided to descend and went back inside the cave. What do you think of them, Lord Amidu? Tranter asked, somewhat anxiously. The strap that holds them needs adjusting, but the lenses work well to protect my eyes. Excellent work, Mr. Tranter. Thank you very much, Lord Amitu. Tranter replied, breathing a sigh of relief. This was just a prototype. I promise you the next ones will be better. I'll return to my workshop. I'll take my leave for now, the Achaean promised. Several nights later, Zerial appeared to the two brothers. Hello, boys. I believe my brother Grill, the spirit of lust, and my other brother Zril, the spirit of greed, are up to no good. I think they've influenced humans and other races to establish establishments where prostitution takes place and where women dance in skimpy clothing or completely naked, Zerial said with concern. I understand. It was to be expected that such establishments would exist. We must verify that the people who engage in prostitution or dance like that are doing so of their own free will and not because they are being forced. I'm sure those establishments make a lot of money. In our world, there are entire organizations that exploit people to enrich a few heartless individuals. If people want to visit these places, I don't think we should prohibit them, as they would do so anyway, Felix explained. I agree, Lucas replied. We should send someone to investigate. We can't do it ourselves because, first, we're very well known, and if Olia or Neras were to catch us in a place like that, they'd never forgive us. Lazar can recommend someone who can investigate. He explained, thanks for letting us know, Zerial, before things get out of control. Felix added, yes, it's happened before, in Loomis, under the Empire. But you're almost awake now. Bye, Zerial replied. The next day, They summoned both Lazar and Alia and explained the situation to them. Oh, I see. You want to know if people in those places are forced to participate, and if so, we'll remove them from the business, right? Alia asked. We can use the new unit of undercover soldiers that Mr. Lazar and I are creating, using what you told me about the detective's work, Alia said. For now, we only have 10 members in that unit, but this investigation will give them the experience they'll need, Lazar commented. Thank you for all your help. We couldn't do this without you, Lucas said gratefully. It's our duty, my lords, Lazar said. You know I'll do whatever I can for our people, he added. The next day, the agents presented themselves. It's an honor to meet my lords in person. My name is Dalita, said a beautiful member of the AIM-SIS, bowing as she spoke alongside two others. Greetings, my lords. Lucas suddenly interrupted. Alades, what are you doing here? And you too? Lucas asked, somewhat agitated. I only seek to redeem myself in your eyes for all the harm I caused you. I was ignorant, and in my ignorance, I was arrogant. Very well. I will be watching your progress, Mr. Alades, Lucas said curtly. I know you still don't trust me, and I don't blame you. I only hope to earn your trust again. With that, he bowed and withdrew with his two friends, whom Lucas had already recognized. I think you forgave him a long time ago, didn't you, Luke? Said Felix. Yes. Lazar has kept me informed of his situation, and I believe he has suffered enough. Lucas retorted. There was a large sign at the entrance of the establishment that read, Antony's Place. Alades and his two friends entered after paying the cover charge, where an imposing Akan stood guard at the entrance. The place was filled with tables and chairs, and in the center, a group of men of different races watched and erupted in cheers around a scantily clad girl who danced with suggestive movements. There were also several girls with skimpy outfits, serving various intoxicating drinks to those present. But there was also a tavern keeper of the Adonia clan. Around the dancer were several deep plates where spectators placed coins of different denominations to compensate the girl for her efforts. In one corner of the establishment, there was a small altar with a statuette of Grill and another of Zrill. She's beautiful, said one of Aladez's friends, trying to contain the desire growing within him. Yes, but we mustn't forget our mission, Aladez reminded him. Inside the establishment's office was Antony, a rather overweight Nailite with a large bald head. He was counting the money he had received that day, and greed was evident in his eyes. If business keeps up like this, I'll be rich in no time, he thought to himself. And Zrill received a dose of power from him. After observing how the place operated, Aladez and his friends left. Early the next morning, the trio gave their report directly to Lucas. They described the place to him. At first glance, it seems the girls aren't forced into it, but we can't be sure. Good work. I think it's Dalita's turn now. Lucas answered them. The agent visited Antony's establishment during the day, pretending to be looking for work as a waitress or dancer. She was escorted to Antony's office, where he looked her up and down. Desire was evident in his eyes. What's your name? The owner asked. My name is Alita, Dalita lied confidently. Very good. You're hired. For now, you'll be a waitress, and later you can be a dancer. With that body, I'm sure you'll attract many clients. I have a lodging for my girls. If you don't have anywhere to live, of course, the rent will be deducted from your salary. Feluc is here. He can escort you there, Antony said, pointing to the Akan who served as his security guard. Yes, Mr. Antony, he replied. Upon arriving at the lodging, there were several girls there, some reading, others embroidering, and others chatting. Hello, I see you're new. My name is Lyrics, one of them said. Hello, my name is Alita, Dalita said, assuming her false identity. It's true that this job wasn't my first choice, but for the moment, it should be enough, Dalita commented. Oh, don't worry. Only some of us like being the object of men's lust. But if we find a better job, we're free to leave, Lyrics said. Is that true? Yes. Mr. Antony may be gluttonous, lustful, and avaricious, but he's not all bad, said Lyrics. Interesting, Dalita murmured. That night, Dalita's shift as a waitress began. At first, she was uncomfortable with the leering stares of the customers, but little by little, she got used to it. She even started receiving generous tips from some of them. Then one of them made the mistake of slapping her on the behind. She turned to him in a fury, momentarily forgetting the role she was playing. She grabbed his wrist and squeezed hard, making the customer howl in pain. Don't you dare touch me again. At that moment, Alades, who was present, intervened. We need service at our table, miss. Dalita saw Alida's expression and realized she was about to fail in her mission, so she calmed down. She bowed to the customer, whose wrist was still throbbing. Please forgive me, sir. The customer, who had grown afraid of her, accepted her apology. It was my fault. It won't happen again. Alides breathed a sigh of relief. He had heard that Dalita had a temper, but he had never witnessed it firsthand. The rest of the evening passed without further incident. The next day, at the inn, Riksos smiled at Dalita. I saw what you did. You put that guy in his place. But I realized you're too strong to be just an unemployed peasant. I think you're much more than you seem. This put Dalita in a bind. No one should know who she really was, at least not yet. She had to think of something quickly. My father was a soldier in the Royal Guard and trained me in unarmed combat techniques from a young age. But he fell ill and died. Riksos' smile widened. Interesting story, and a rather convenient one. Very well. I won't pry any further. You can tell me when you're ready, Riksos replied. You're very perceptive. I think your story is much more interesting than mine. If you'd like to tell me, Dalita said, now interested in her roommate. There's not much to tell, really. It's a hobby of mine. I observe a person and try to deduce their motivations. I'm almost always right. I've been doing that since I was a child. Could it be that you have a hidden power? Dalita asked. I've never thought of it that way. Riksos said thoughtfully. I know someone who can help you with that. But I can't take you to him yet, Dalita stated. Right? You have to finish your mission first, don't you? Riksos asked. Of course. Speaking of which, I think I'll go for a walk, said Dalita. The walk led her to a place where she rented a horse. From there she galloped off, and half an hour later, she dismounted. Her horse was sweating, and entered Lucas's office to give her report. Then she remounted and galloped back to return the horse she had rented. She then walked to the establishment and knocked on Antony's office door. Mr. Antony, I have this letter from Lord Lucas for you, she said, handing an envelope with an official seal to the businessman. Lord Lucas? Antony asked incredulously. Yes. So please don't reject his invitation, Mr. Antony. What does he want from me? He asked again, fearfully. That's something you should ask him. I only delivered his message. So you're not an unemployed peasant woman. And that explains how strong you are. Antony said, now calmer. My parents are peasants, yes. I am Dalita, a member of Lady Olia's Amazons. Now I bid you farewell. Have a good day, she said respectfully. Dalita returned to the inn. Riksos was still there, as it wasn't yet nightfall. Riksos, I've just finished my mission, so I can take you to Lord Epitras, Dalita told her. Epitras the mage? You know him? Riksos asked in surprise. My real name is Dalita. I'm an Amazon, under the command of Lady Olia. The soldier introduced herself. I imagined you held a high position. My intuition almost never fails me. Very well, Riksos. Do you wish to meet Lord Epitras? Of course. Entertaining clients at night doesn't seem like a promising future, the waitress replied. Let's go then. Have you ever ridden a horse? Dalita asked Riksos. I'm also the daughter of peasants. Of course, Riksos replied. They both walked to the stables and rented one horse each. Then they headed for the government buildings. Upon arrival, they stopped next to a smaller building. They tied their horses outside the building and went inside. Upon entering, they saw a young woman writing at a desk. Welcome, Miss Dalita. And this must be Riksos. Lord Epitras is expecting you, she said, looking up. Dalita opened the door and entered, followed by Riksos. There was Epitras, trying to decipher documents of the Empire. Good afternoon, Lord Epitras. The mage, who had been engrossed in the document in his hand, awoke from what seemed to be a trance. Oh, pardon me. I didn't know you were there. Hello, Dalita. And you must be Riksos. Please, sit here, he said, pointing to a cushioned chair. He took his staff and held it close to the young woman, and the gem on it glowed. You were right, Dalita. She does possess a hidden power, but she will need considerable discipline to fully control it. Epitras diagnosed. Very well, Riksos. To control that power, you must join us Amazons. But the training will be the hardest thing you've ever done. And sometimes you'll want to give up. Would you? Dalita asked gravely. Will this training make me as strong as you? Depending on your physical condition, you could even be stronger than me. But I warn you, it will be very hard. Dalita warned her. I don't want to spend my life thinking about what could have been. I'll do it, Riksos said with resolution. Your training will last 5 months. And only then will you begin your training with Lord Epitras. Dalita escorted her back to her lodgings. She would work that night, and the next day, she would submit her resignation to Antony. The next day, Antony was in his office, nervously preparing for his interview with Lucas, when there was a knock at the door. It was Alades and his two friends, wearing their armor and with swords at their belts. Were you involved in this too? Antony asked, surprised. We've come to make sure you attend your meeting with Lord Lucas, was Alades' response. Antony went with them, submissive and expecting the worst. So you're Mr. Antony. Please, have a seat. Lucas was sitting at his desk. Antony timidly sat down across from him. When I first heard about your establishment, I thought you were exploiting women who were being forced to work for you. Hearing this, Antony felt his nervousness turn into genuine terror. Seeing his interlocutor's reaction, Lucas decided to be less formal and more friendly. My investigators, Dalita and Alades, tell me that you are quite fair in your dealings with your clients and employees, Lucas explained, causing the businessman to sigh with relief. Your business provides a service that some people seek, and since you don't abuse your workers, I'm going to offer you the presence of some of my agents, but in exchange for a tax of approximately 10% of your business's income. Your tax will be higher than other businesses because of the potential for some customers to become violent. Lucas explained. Those are very generous terms, Lord Lucas, Antony said, bowing his head. I've heard my competitors aren't as nice as I am. The businessman said conspiratorially. Oh, don't worry about them, Mr. Antony. They're being investigated too. Lucas retorted. Can I be honest with you, Lord Lucas? I've never met you personally. I only saw you from afar at Feluc's celebration. I thought you'd be a tough, ruthless man. But you're very reasonable, just as your reputation indicates. You've already met Alades and his two friends, haven't you? They'll continue to visit your establishment occasionally, pretending to be customers. And if there's any trouble, they'll be there. And if it's something serious, they'll let me know. Then Lucas stood up, extending his hand, which Antony shook quickly. Later, he was sitting in his office when there was a knock at the door. Come in, he said listlessly. Then Lyrics entered. Good morning, Mr. Antony. I've come to submit my resignation, she told Antony. But just like that? He asked, surprised. Yes, I've just received an offer I can't refuse, she explained to the businessman. I wish you success in your new job, then. We'll miss you here. That night, Zariel appeared to Lucas and Felix. Hello, boys, he said talkatively. Two other beings stood beside him. Hello, Zariel, but who are them? Felix asked, pointing to the two who were with the spirit. These are my brothers, Grill and Zrill. They promised to behave if I introduced them to you, Zariel replied. Nice to meet you. I'm Grill. I've heard a lot about you too. Chill and Euphril aren't very happy with you. I think we'll stay here. We were worried that you wanted to suppress greed and lust, but you only want to regulate them, the latter replied. Nice to meet you, Lord Grill and Lord Zrill, Felix responded. Oh, you don't have to be so formal. You speak to Zariel as a friend. That's the treatment we want, too. It's tiring being treated like an all-powerful deity when you're not one. I understand, Zrill. As for allowing greed and lust, that's human nature. But we must prevent them from causing problems for others, Lucas replied. I'm glad. Zariel tells me you're organizing a fighting tournament. Why don't you use the Loomis Stadium? The Empire used it for ceremonies, spectacles, and in its later years, for executing prisoners, imagining that would deter others from rebelling. Of course, that didn't work, Zrill suggested. Loomis has a stadium? Felix asked, intrigued. Yes, but it must be overgrown. I don't think it would be much trouble to clear it and make repairs to the building. I think it would be much easier than building a new one. Because, as you may have noticed, the buildings in Loomis were built to last, Zrill explained. That's magnificent. Could you contact Alios to give him an idea of where he is? Lucas asked. That won't be a problem, Zariel replied. Thank you all three for your help, Lucas concluded. I want to introduce you to some of my other brothers, though on another night, because you are about to wake up, Zariel finished. The following night, Zariel appeared to the brothers again. Hello again, boys. Hello, Zariel. And I see two more of your brothers, Lucas greeted them. Yes, these are Cal, spirit of altruism, and Dislal, spirit of humility, Zariel replied. I must admit I'm impressed. With all that power, authority, and influence you have, none of it has gone to your heads, Dislal remarked. Well, it hasn't been easy. Ego can be a difficult thing to control. All that my lord treatment, the bowing and flattery to gain my favor still makes me uncomfortable after all these years, Felix replied. That's true. but our mother told us before she died, I know you will do great things for your fellow man. I think she somehow knew, or at least suspected something. The point is, we don't want to let her down, wherever she may be," said Felix thoughtfully. "I wonder if, before she died, she had a vision of your future," Callum mused. "Thank you. I just wanted to introduce you to my brothers. Until next time." Zariel waved his hand to say goodbye. True to his word, Zariel contacted Aelios in his dreams and gave him the approximate location of the stadium ruins. Aelios assembled a team to clear the overgrown vegetation covering the building, but realized it was immense. He would need many more workers. Aelios wanted to repair the site as soon as possible, even though there was still no exact date for the start of the tournament. He left his group to begin the work of preparing the stadium while he went to recruit more people. It would be necessary to use city funds to finance the construction. Expert builders would need to be brought in from Feluc. Back in Feluc, Antony was pleased. He was now a legitimate businessman. The document signed by Lucas proved it. Antony was sitting at one of the tables watching the spectacle. Just then, Alades entered the establishment. Antony saw him and beckoned him closer. Alades approached and stood near Antony's table. "Please, Mr. Alades, sit with me," the businessman requested. "Very well, but I'm working," Alades indicated. "Oh, don't worry. I just wanted to ask you a few questions about Lord Lucas. When you came looking for me, I thought Mr. Lucas would order me thrown into a dungeon, never to see the light of day again," Antony said confidentially. "Oh, Mr. Lucas is very gentle and kind, but never, under any circumstances, make him angry," Alades advised. "How so?" the businessman asked with interest. "More than 15 years ago, I was an arrogant young man who thought himself very strong. I thought that because he stayed behind the front lines it was out of weakness and cowardice. I've never been so wrong in my life. All the battle plans were created by Lord Lucas to reduce casualties, both ours and the enemy's," Alades explained. "So, all those victories were due to Lord Lucas's brilliance," said Antony. "Yes, but I desired his wife, Lady Neris, and stupidly, I believed I deserved her more than he did. I kidnapped her. Although it wasn't easy, she's very strong. I needed my 2 friends to subdue her. At that moment, I began to suspect that if she was that strong, perhaps Mr. Lucas wasn't as weak as I thought. But in my arrogance, I dismissed that idea. When he arrived, I had my sword, my shield, and I was wearing my breastplate. He was unarmed. However, several seconds later, I was lying on the ground. My shield was broken, my breastplate was shattered, and I had several broken bones. From the ground, I saw the expression on his face. I had never felt so much fear in my life. I was sure he was going to kill me. But somehow Lady Neris had freed herself from her bonds and stopped him. After that, I spent 2 years doing hard labor, although my sentence was reduced for helping after the big storm we had," Alades explained. "And how does he treat you now, Mr. Alades?" Antony asked. "Well, he never mentioned the incident again, but he's stricter with me than with others. And I don't blame him." It was Alades' candid answer. Back in his office, oblivious to the conversation between Alades and Antony, Lucas was reading a message written by Aelios about the amphitheater they had found. It must have a capacity for more than 15,000 people. He decided he had to see it for himself. So, after discussing it with Neris, he decided to travel to Loomis. But this time, Neris and his twins would travel with him, accompanied by the 2 Riksos that now wore red collars to indicate they were domesticated, in case they strayed from the group, but they didn't. Their protective instinct prevailed. The family would travel in a carriage, though the lupin creatures would walk beside them. The road to Loomis had been improved, so it was more stable and free of overgrown vegetation. There were 2 carriages and several knights and Amazons as their escort. As always, the journey took 2 days. Upon arrival, Aelios greeted them personally. "Good morning, Lord Lucas," said Aelios. "You don't have to be so formal, Aelios," replied Lucas, extending his hand, which Aelios shook. "Why don't we have some tea before we start?" Lucas suggested. "Yes, of course," Aelios replied. Later, in Aelios's office, they sipped the steaming, comforting beverage. It was early for lunch, so the group headed to the site of the renovations, which seemed to be progressing smoothly. The stadium was open air and reminded them of ancient Greek and Roman amphitheaters. Since there were no loudspeakers or anything to amplify the sound, the building had to be designed to optimize the movement of sound waves. The seats were actually steps that rose from near the platform in the center to a considerable height. I think it will take another 2 months to have everything ready for the tournament, Alios said. Very good work, Alios, Lucas replied. Oh no, all this work has been done by the workers here, as well as those who came from Feluc, said Alios. Oh, don't be so modest, Alios, replied Lucas. The administrator was trying to avoid taking credit for the work, as he had seen Lucas do many times. You organized it, and the renovation is progressing faster than expected, thanks to you, said Lucas. Castor and Pollux were exploring the surrounding area, as they rarely had the opportunity to explore new places. They had been brought by their parents when they were younger, but had always been supervised by adults. This time, they had much more freedom of movement. The Riksos, loyal and proud, accompanied the teenagers wherever they went, even though they startled others, chains and all. In truth, those chains were there for the tranquility of others. The Riksos could break them whenever they wanted. Mr. Lucas, do you remember those weapons similar to yours that the Empire was developing? Alios asked. You mean the muskets? Lucas asked. Yes, we've managed to replicate them, and also the formula you gave us for the explosive they use. Thanks to that, we can manufacture more. But we found something bigger that works using the same principle. We tested it by firing it at a huge rock, and it shattered it to pieces, Alios explained. This piqued Lucas's interest. I'd like to see that, Lucas said. They all then left the construction area and headed back to the center of Loomis. When they arrived at the building where all the firearms were, there he saw it. This is a mortar. It fires large iron balls and has more range than a trebuchet. Or am I mistaken? Lucas said, impressed. I imagined you'd know something about this, Alios commented. Yes, it was used to breach enemy walls and can also be used to sink ships from the beach. The truth is, the Empire had made great strides. It's a shame that almost everything it did was for war, Lucas explained. Now this will help us end the war against the Gors before it even begins, Alios said confidently. Don't get ahead of yourself. The Gors will be the toughest enemies we've ever faced. Many will die, both from us and from them. So we need to keep gathering allies. If there's anyone left in Trentala, we have to get them to join us, Lucas reminded him. Lucas decided to contact Zariel. Hello, Lucas. How are you? Do you have a question for me? The spirit asked. Yes. I wanted to know if there is anyone in Trentala who could help us against the Gors, Lucas said. Well, there are the Turos, Zariel replied. Turos? Lucas asked. Yes, I believe you call them lycanthropes. Werewolves? Lucas asked. You could call them that, but it will be difficult to gain their trust. They are a race proud of themselves and their achievements. They were created by my brother, Aratlil, spirit of pride, and my other brother, Tamlil, spirit of envy. They created them simply to prove they could, but they never cared about them. Aside from leaving a few of them stranded in your world where they were killed simply for being different, Zariel explained. Several of your brothers chose negative emotions because they are psychopaths, right? Lucas asked, somewhat indignant. Honestly, I don't know if they were like this before they started absorbing negative emotions, or if they became this way afterwards. Anyway, getting back to the Turos. They live in a hidden valley north of Tentrila. Because of how cold and remote it is there, they might not feel threatened by the Gors, since the Gors aren't fond of the cold. But the Gor leaders consider their ideology absolute, Zariel elaborated. Changing the subject, what's on other continents? Lucas asked, now curious. For now, I'll only tell you about one. Cater, but I don't recommend visiting it, the spirit began. Why is that? The man asked, curious. Because it's full of creatures I rescued from their world before they went extinct, like dinosaurs and other animals that populated your world. I saw that the asteroid was going to cause the extinction of many creatures that at the time seemed fascinating to me. So I transported some of them slowly and painstakingly. I created what you'd call a nature reserve, Zariel explained, beaming with pride. Oh, so now you have your own Jurassic Park. Interesting, Lucas murmured. Oh, but I don't just have dinosaurs there. I have many other creatures like mammoths and many other creatures that I've actually collected from other planets. When you have as much time as I do, you have to keep yourself busy, Zariel said with a smile. That night, Zariel appeared to Arias and Rosu. Hello, boys, he said matter-of-factly. It seemed that this was his favorite way of greeting. Good evening, Lord Zariel. They both said almost in unison, almost reverently. Oh, you don't have to be so formal with me. We're friends, aren't we? the spirit said in a friendly tone. That's right. It's just that we're not used to speaking directly to a deity, Ares replied. Don't worry about that. I've come to tell you that the people of Loomis are organizing a tournament of unarmed combat where all races will participate. I suspected you'd be interested, the spirit announced. All races can participate. Rosu asked thoughtfully. Yes, even you. I don't know, but if you ask me, this would be an excellent opportunity to experience firsthand how strong your allies are, Zariel recommended. And where will it be held? Where will it be? Ares asked. They're already preparing the place, and there will be a huge turnout. Everyone wants to see their favorite warriors in action. Even Felix and Lucas will participate. It will be an unarmed fight, Zariel repeated. That would be wonderful. I've heard they're very strong, but I've never seen them in action. I can't wait to test myself against them, Rosu said excitedly. Me neither, Ares confirmed. Not only them, they'll be facing off against members of the other races, who are actually quite strong as well, Zariel mentioned. Now I must take my leave. I need to contact another race that could also be their allies. The Turos, Zariel explained. Turos? What are they like? Ares asked. They look like this, Zariel said, taking the form of one of them. Yes, they don't look like you. But like you, they've lived in isolation for a long time and have strong family values, just like you. But whether they join us or not will depend entirely on them. This alliance is, after all, voluntary. I'll take my leave for now. Oh, I almost forgot. They don't have a date for the tournament yet, but they might send a messenger to let you know. The following night, Tulak, leader of the Turos, was worried. He was tall and muscular, his body covered in fur. His face was canine, his ears always perked up, and his amber eyes scanned the horizon. His race would make any human on Earth think of a werewolf. His race valued strength, but also wisdom. He hadn't been the strongest of his kind for a long time, but the others respected his wisdom, so none had challenged him for leadership in years. The hunt, though successful, hadn't yielded the expected number of prey to feed his people. Could something be causing their numbers to dwindle? With this in mind, he fell asleep. Then Zariel appeared to him in his Turo form. Do not fear. My name is Zariel, the spirit of creation and happiness. What do you want from me, Lord Zariel? Tulak asked, startled. I have come to warn you about a relentless enemy. They are called the Gors. They are taking control of this entire continent. But they haven't found this valley yet because they are still far away, and besides, they don't like the cold. But sooner or later, they will arrive here. How many are they, Lord Zariel? Asked the Turo leader. They have an army of thousands of soldiers. They are hundreds of miles south of here. I don't expect you to take my word for it. Send several scouts south, so they can see for themselves that what I say is true. But tell them to make sure they aren't seen. I will speak to you again in 3 weeks, when your scouts have returned. Tulak did exactly that, and his scouts, who, like all members of their race, possessed excellent night vision, agility, physical strength, and powerful claws, all corroborated Zariel's words. They all delivered the fateful news. Lord Tulak, they said, they have a vast army and wear metal armor, while we still use animal skins. We are stronger and more agile than they are, but they are simply too numerous for us. We also witnessed them enslaving other races. That night, as he slept, Zariel appeared to him again. Greetings, Tulak, leader of the Turos, Zariel said. You were right about everything you told me. How can I save my people from this threat? Tulak asked pleadingly. On the continent near here, a coalition of different races is forming, preparing to fight them. A coalition of different races? How is that possible? It hasn't been easy. It all started more than 15 years ago. In that coalition, there are humans of different races. Akaros, giants, Acheans, Teleras, Achaeans, Terids, Ogders, and even some Gors who disagree with how their leadership is handling things. All of them. And who is powerful enough to lead them? The Turo asked, still in amazement. The coalition is led by 2 humans, who happen to be friends of mine. Their names are Felix and Lucas. They are very strong, but it's not about subjugating other races like the Gors do. Although it was necessary to fight at first, the other races agreed to join Feluc. That's the name of the nation that includes all the races, and they have a say in everything that is done in the nation, Zariel explained. I have to meet these extraordinary humans. You may not have to wait. Feluc is building ships that will eventually be able to reach you. Feluc is making use of the knowledge the Empire left behind in Loomis. They have a colony there, the spirit explained. But I've heard from the stories of our ancestors that the city is cursed, the Turo leader replied. They built a wall around the cursed part, so there's no problem with that. By the way, I sense you're worried. Don't be afraid to share anything with me, Zariel said in a friendly tone. The truth is, we live by hunting and whatever fruit we can find. But lately there's less prey, and the weather feels colder. There are about 500 of us in the whole valley, and it's becoming harder to feed everyone, even when we're using the animals to their fullest extent, Tulak explained. Yes, you respect nature, and that's something the Gors don't. It's possible that their excessive hunting is causing havoc even as far north as here. I'll tell Lucas and Felix about your problem. I suspect they'll have some creative solution. They often surprise me. I'll take my leave for now, Lord Tulak. The following night, Zariel appeared to Aelios. Lord Zariel, how may I serve you? Aelios asked humbly. You don't have to be so formal with me, Aelios, Zariel said, trying to be more friendly. I couldn't treat you any other way, my Lord Zariel. You are the spirit of creation, Aelios said vehemently. Zariel gave up trying to persuade him for the time being. He knew how Aelios thought about figures of authority. Very well, Aelios. Have you heard of the Turos? I've heard they're like the Riksos, if only they could walk on two legs. True, but unlike the Riksos, they can communicate using words like all the other races. They could be our allies, but they are currently in need because the Gors' actions are reducing their food sources. Their valley is in the north of the continent of Trentala. It would be good to show them our goodwill by helping them, the spirit explained. But how will we get there? That place seems far away. That's true. But you can travel around the coast of Trentala until you reach a gigantic rock surrounded by mists. That would take you about 3 weeks by boat. And once you reach the Great Rock, the Valley of the Turos would be about 2 days away on foot, Zariel continued. It will be done as you command. We will send an expedition there, Aelios replied. Very well, but I would feel better if you went on that expedition, Zariel said, which made Aelios freeze. He wasn't a man of action like Felix, Lucas, or Lazar. He was better with a pen than a sword. He had always declined Lucas's attempts to train him so that he would at least be adequate if something went wrong. I can't fight, Aelios protested. No, but you're good at negotiating. You handle yourself well when it comes to diplomacy. Besides, if fighting becomes necessary, you can channel my power to heal your companion's wounds. Aelios knew that Zariel wouldn't take no for an answer. It will be as you wish, Lord Zariel. Over 3 weeks later, Aelios, his entourage, and 4 carts full of food, tools, and weapons arrived at the main village of the Turos. Tulak, having been notified beforehand, was waiting for them. Aelios was nervous. The Turos were imposing, and their claws frightened him. Welcome, messengers of Feluc, said Tulak, showing his fangs in a smile that only made poor Aelios more uneasy. But he was there now, come what may. Both sides sat around the fire and talked for several hours, which reassured the troubled emissary. Continue on episode 7.